What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex Yu, and you're watching the Ragin Ronin review. I got a review for you. Last weekend, I saw Independence Day Resurgence, and it is, of course, the sequel to the 1996 summer blockbuster hit, Independence Day, which came out 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I watched the film in the theaters, and I thought it was the best movie I had ever seen. I saw it 3 times in the theaters, and I also told all my friends to go watch it, and it was awesome. And it also redefined summer blockbusters. Now fast forward to 20 years later in 2016, now, the big question is, was the wait worth it? Was the 20-year wait for Independence Day Resurgence worth it? Not really. Not really at all. Not by a long shot. This movie suffers so many problems, and one of the biggest problems was the fact that it got made. Now, I'm not talking about the fact that it got made at all. I'm talking about the fact that it got made now. Now, this has all to do with relevance. Is the film relevant now? Does anybody care about a sequel? Is this sequel even necessary? No, it's not. The movie should have came out 2 or 3 or 4 years after the original, but no, Roland Emmerich was too busy working on Godzilla. Anyways, the sequel is directed by Roland Emmerich, who directed the first one, and like I said before, this has to do with relevance. 20 years later, is this movie relevant? Not too much to the audience, but 20 years later, like the fact that it takes place 20 years later, it's actually relevant to the story, because, well, 20 years later, the humans in the movie are able to harness the alien technology from the, of course, the alien spacecraft and the big mothership, and they're able to rather manufacture these fighter ships that can defy the laws of physics and gravity, and they're also able to reproduce energy weapons, which is what the aliens used against the humans. So that part's relevant about it. But I think the number one thing is trying to keep it relevant. And how do you do that? And that is by, advancing the humans, making changes to the franchise, because the movie came out originally in 1996 and it was an alien invasion movie, and in my opinion, it's the definitive alien invasion movie. The big question is, how can you make the sequel better and bigger than the original? Well, Roland Emmerich decided to do just that, literally, just the bigger part, bigger and badder, not necessarily better. So bigger and badder, but not better. That's what Independence Day Resurgence is, because they basically gave us another alien invasion, and then they made the aliens bigger and badder. That's what it is. So before we had city-sized motherships, now we have countrywide motherships. And I'm not even kidding. I'm talking about in the literal sense. This mothership is so huge that when it lands on Earth, like when it lands on the surface, you could see it from space, like a claw on the Earth. And that, in my opinion, is ridiculous. I think that if Neil deGrasse Tyson had to say something about it, he would have mentioned that this, like a claw, like an alien claw that big, would have destroyed the Earth. And it probably would have. But it just casually lands, destroys a few buildings here and there, and which brings us to the scene where we see all that citywide destruction. And when I was watching their spacecraft, fly through all that destruction, dodging disasters, I was kind of bored. I was not excited, and you know why? It's because I've seen that thing before. I've seen it in 2012. I've seen it in Independence Day. I've seen it in a lot of films. And Roland Emmerich, he's responsible for a lot of disaster films. They're not necessarily disasters, critically, but not maybe critically, but definitely not financially. But, I've seen a lot of disaster genre films, and Roland Emmerich is the pioneer of that. I mean, Independence Day, Godzilla, White House Down, 2012, The Day After Tomorrow. He loves making these types of films, and I feel that if you take all those films that I've mentioned that he directed, throw them in a blender, press puree, you end up with Independence Day Resurgence, because you have all those elements. He takes elements from all those films and he puts them in Independence Day Resurgence. We have a scene where where they're flying through all this destruction, and I'm talking about like really crazy destruction, like of biblical proportions, okay? Things are just blowing up everywhere, buildings come crashing down, and the ground is just like freaking rising up, and it's just ridiculous. And all, you know, they're just dodging everything, and then Jeff Goldblum's character, David Levinson, he had to throw out this one-liner, which is supposed to make us laugh, which is, they like to get the landmarks. And it's just not funny. It's just not funny at all. It just feels like it was forced, and that is what this sequel is. It feels very, very forced. There's a lot of elements in this film that just don't work. And Roland Emmerich tries to give us a lot of new things. He tries to, I mean, I'm sure him and his team of writers, and there are a lot of writers, by the way, they decided that they wanted to, you know, think outside the box and try to do a lot of different things. And I can't really tell you what they are, but I'll just tell you that it's bigger and badder, okay? And, you know, all these things that they do differently, I feel like they just don't work because they end up becoming subplots. There are just too many subplots. Before, the original film was a very linear plot. It had a very linear plot. It brought three very likable and memorable characters together. David Levinson, Captain Stephen Hiller, and of course President Thomas Whitmore, played by Bill Pullman. And, you know, these are three different parties that got brought together by a single cause, and that is trying to defend the Earth, okay? Now you have all these other characters, and it creates for so many subplots. You got all these young actors, these young new actors that got brought into the new, you know, this franchise, and they just don't have the same type of charisma as the original characters. Now, the original characters that are back, Jeff Goldblum, Bill Pullman, Vivica A. Fox, and Judd Hirsch. There's no Will Smith, by the way. He's either too expensive or the scheduling problems because he was working on Suicide Squad, or a little bit of both. But anyways, you know, all these characters that got brought back from the original, I was excited to see them back. But what they gave us was a half-assed version of those characters. What they did was very, very piss poor. The reason why I say that was because I think that 20 years have passed. They have forgotten what made their characters in the original film so likable and memorable. I felt that those characters that they played were totally memorable. Thomas Whitmore gives us an epic president speech. Jeff Goldblum and his hilarious line delivery, and the way he's so quirky, you know, like, we don't see any of that in this film. He just gives us these forced one-liner humor, like moments of comedy, which doesn't work. It's not funny. And, of course, all these new characters, they just don't fit into the mix. They were just thrown in, and man, once again, just like I said, create a lot of, like, subplots. Too many subplots, okay? And I thought Brent Spiner was dead. He's not. He's back. And, man, just a lot of problems. Now, Roland Emmerich, of course, he is responsible for a lot of disaster. He's responsible for creating a lot of CG destruction, and we get a lot of that. It's just not that exciting to me. Maybe it's just me. But also, he gives us a lot of these moments which are supposed to be spectacular. For example, the aerial dogfighting scenes between the humans and the aliens, right? But all I end up seeing there is just a bunch of dots flying around with green shit flying everywhere. I'm quoting Will Smith, okay, from Independence Day. So it just doesn't feel exciting because we've seen that sort of thing before. It's just not it's just not very engaging. In fact, it feels boring to me. Now, the last thing that I want to mention that really hurts this film is the substantial amount of China pandering. Now, this is a thing now for a lot of summer blockbuster, or like just blockbuster films with huge budgets. They do something called China pandering, and what that means is that they understand that China makes up a huge part of their international box office. So what they do is they try to please the China market by adding them into the story. You know, which is totally fine, but it's just too in your face. For example, the product placement. There is so much Chinese product placement. It's actually only two, but it's just too much. Because, for example, there's this scene where he orders this Chinese milk from a vending machine, and it's just right in your face. It takes up the entire screen. And then later on, the character forgets his milk at the table, and then his buddy says, "Hey, do you still want your milk?" And another thing is that when they chat from Earth to the moon, they use this Skype type messenger app, and it's called QQ. This is an app that they use in China, like it's a real life app. And once they close the app, it says, "Thank you for using QQ." It's just too much, you know what I'm saying? And on top of that, they added all these Chinese actors, which I think is totally fine, but then they speak in Mandarin with no subtitles, no English subtitles. And I'm just thinking, did the studios forget who they're making this film for? Oh yeah, they're making it for China. Because when you're watching this film, it actually starts off with a scene with some kind of narration that says something along the lines of, the Chinese government has strongly assisted in the planetary defense program. And of course, the commander of that defense program is, of course, Chinese. And, you know, I'm not trying to get racial and all that. That's not what I'm here for. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say that it's so much to the point that you forgot they forget the art form of making a movie. Now it's just about advertising. Now it's just about promoting a country. You know what I'm saying? It's just too much. And it's distracting. It's kind of annoying, as a matter of fact. So, man, so many of these factors hurt the movie, and I'm gonna have to give this film a 3 out of 10. 3 out of 10. 1 point for the visual effects, 2 points for trying to do different things, and the third point goes for effort. Okay, just for the effort, okay? So 3 out of 10. I cannot recommend this film. If you are someone who wants to watch it, then you're probably someone who's curious, okay? Who's a fan of the original and you're curious, then by all means go check it out. But if you wanted to know if you should watch this film, I would say don't watch this film, okay? I can't recommend it. It's the worst film I've seen all year. Well, maybe not, but it's the worst film I've seen all summer. 3 out of 10, that's all I gotta say in this video. And if you enjoyed this review, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name is Alex. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace. Say amazing visual effects. The orcs look incredible. In fact, this is some of the best visual effects work that I've